Okay, well, we've got another one here. This is the Scotsman, and it's got Mr. MacDonald. Childcare Minister resigns over his past behaviour, but we can change that pretty quickly because former SNP Minister Mark MacDonald seeks help over inappropriate behaviour. Now, you've pointed out that this man has got a lot of responsibilities, or did have: adoption and fostering, childcare implementation, children's hearing, child protection, children's rights, children's services, early years, looked after children, protection of vulnerable groups, social service workforce, but he's done something inappropriate. The Sun had picked up here, Sleaze row. Apparently he's been suspended from the SNP now as he faces a second complaint of inappropriate behaviour, but Nicola Sturgeon had supported him. This man seems to be heavily...
Well, he's certainly being backed up and helped here, but you notice that, just before we get David to comment, you notice that he has taken the same approach as Weinstein and some other big names, where you admit what you've done and you immediately put yourself into some kind of rehabilitation and seek help.
Yeah.
And then you presume that you won't be prosecuted for it afterwards. It seems like a good deal, Brian.
Well, I think they're following a template at the moment. I'm going to stick with my feeling on what's going on, that as very serious offences, of course not related to Mr. MacDonald, but serious offences over the abuse of children are coming to the surface, and I think we've got a little bit over that a little bit later in the news. Everybody else is putting out a smokescreen for their misdemeanours. Template is my opinion. David, I don't know what you feel.
Does it work with other crimes? I mean, if a burglar says, "Look, I'm very, very sorry about my behaviour. I'm going to seek counselling," does that mean that we don't have to worry that he's nicked your stuff? Or is it only leading personalities and politicians that can play that card? Now, you said earlier that that he admits what he's done. Well, has he? I'm not so sure that he has, because this was denied vehemently up until yesterday. The Sun put this article online. It was denied by the SNP so strongly that the Sun pulled the article from their online edition. But there had been sufficient media interest created that later that afternoon, the SNP announced that he'd been suspended from the parliamentary party and from the SNP as a whole. So there's clearly more information about to come out. I think there's going to be some revelations coming out at the weekend. Now, with all this man's responsibility for children, and it's quite clear from this that we're not talking anymore about a jokey text that was ill-judged, which is the official explanation as to why he resigned, which carries no more weight than talk of touching a journalist's knee as reason to lose our defence secretary. So something's going to come out, but this is a man responsible for children, responsible for named person, responsible for all the parts where the state is stepping in and looking after children. And what has he been doing? And the young ladies he's been communicating with, are any of those under 18? Do any of those have named person? These are all questions that we'll need to get answers to. And of course, the SNP government are saying absolutely nothing at the moment. But it seems unlikely that they will be able to keep a lid on this for much longer.
Yeah, and David, some people are sufficiently fired up over this case to write to the press, and you've got a letter here from a lady. One rule for him. I'll read it out briefly. Former Minister for Childcare and Early Years, Mark MacDonald, has asked for privacy while he deals with whatever problems he has that render him unfit for office in the Scottish Government. Your report, 13th November. Oh, how the parents of Scotland would like to be afforded the same privacy to deal with their personal matters. Will Mr MacDonald's indiscretions appear on his children's chronologies, like the rest of us, and be discussed and shared amongst myriad practitioners, assessing its impact on their well-being and whether it constitutes a concern that requires the state to intervene? That's a pretty penetrating letter, ripping the top off, of course, named person scheme.
Yes, and full disclosure, that was for my wife. I think I should probably mention that, but I think extremely well judged and asked the right question. And of course, there are many more questions that this gentleman's going to have to answer. And even the BBC doorstepped him as he was trying to sneak into his constituency office and asked him a few questions. And he said that basically he wanted a chance to go on, and it was up to his constituents to decide whether he had a job anymore, and they could make that decision in 2020. So there you go.
In 2020. Okay, well, we've mentioned named persons. Let's bring this in. You've got named persons fringe here, and I can call these back on screen for you. You've also got postcards, which are really outstanding, I think, which are going out. Postcards from the fringe. This one starts, I'm pregnant with my 4th child, but after a horrendous experience with a bullying health visitor whose unprofessional conduct was a complete disgrace, I have no intention of letting one of these snoopers into my home. We've got another one here which starts off, our family have successfully opted out of the named person scheme. And what's the final one here? As a teenager, I feel completely let down. I no longer feel I can confide in any of my teachers because I worry that all my personal information is being stored and shared against my will. These are very powerful, David. What's happening here with named person and the postcards?
Well, having been excluded from the official proceedings looking at named person, some people who've been involved in the No to Named Person campaign decided to run their own parallel fringe event. So they put out a call for information, for opinions, for stories, for testimony to the people of Scotland. And they got in many of these. There was 93 of these cards went into to the Parliament. So these are parents and children of Scotland expressing their view and very often their experience of the named person scheme as it's been in action over the last few years. So this was an event that happened in Edinburgh on Wednesday last week, and there was further testimony given during an afternoon event, which was video recorded, and that video will be up quite shortly, so people can see what's said. And then the people who organised this went down to the Parliament and handed this into James Donnan, the convener of the committee that's looking at named person. And so he assured them that he would read all of these accounts and take it all into consideration. Now, 2 of those cards, which you had up on the screen there, finishes with, well, one says, I want to move out of Scotland when I leave school and finish university. And another one says, if I could leave Scotland, I would. The culture of state snooping is modelled on the East German Stasi. So this is how people are viewing it. They're extremely unhappy. The experiences, one of the experiences, the false information which was being held by practitioners, by the professionals about one family, had to be challenged by getting all the subject access requests failed to generate the information. The family had to go to the court and get a court order, and because they then had to go and get bailiffs to go to the council office to get the information, and because the bailiffs turned up without notice, they got this information completely unredacted, and there was information which is full of lies, full of stories made up about the family, and some of them were headed, don't tell mum, don't share it with mum. So this is information being kept from the parents. It's extremely sinister. More and more is coming out, and it was a very good event to bring this to light. So it now just remains to be seen whether the committee of the Scottish Parliament will actually react appropriately to all of this information that they've received.
Can't really expect that, I suppose.
No, but incredibly serious stuff. We need to keep reporting this, and of course parents need to understand that at the moment there is a massive attempt to grab control of children.